In April 2026, a group of passengers boarded a cruise ship in Argentina, expecting a relaxing voyage across the Atlantic, heading toward the Canary Island of Tenerife. But just 5 days into the journey, one of the passengers suddenly fell ill. 5 days after that, he was dead. When the ship arrived at St Helena Island on April 24, 13 days later, the situation became even more alarming. The deceased passenger's body was taken for examination at a local hospital. His wife, who had accompanied his body, was not also feeling well. The next day, she boarded a flight to Johannesburg, South Africa, but she never made it through the airport. She suddenly collapsed shortly after landing and died. At that point, the cruise company still had not confirmed any connection between those deaths and an onboard outbreak. But the same day the wife died, another passenger from the ship became critically ill. He was evacuated to South Africa and admitted to the intensive care unit. 5 days later, on admitted to the intensive care unit, yet another passenger developed sudden breathing difficulties and died shortly after. Doctors in South Africa managed to confirm the cause, Hantavirus infection. The World Health Organization was alerted, and investigators ultimately identified a total of 8 hantavirus cases linked to the ship. Hantaviruses are a family of viruses that typically spread from animal to human, most commonly through airborne particles contaminated with infected rodent droppings. This route of transmission making outbreaks rare, but if it does happen, it is extremely dangerous, especially in enclosed environments like ships. There are actually multiple types of hantaviruses, and they don't behave all the same way. Some of them cause a devastating form of illness where the lung and the heart begin to fail together, leading to a severe respiratory collapse. Others target the kidneys and causing a completely different clinical picture. But in both cases, the outcome can be rapid and severe if not recognized early. What makes this situation even more puzzling is that there didn't seem to be any obvious rodent exposure on the ship. And that's confusing because hantaviruses are spread to humans through inhaled particles contaminated by infected rodent droppings. But there was no rodent in the ship. So the question immediately becomes, where did it come from? And there is one particular hantavirus that changes everything. Hantavirus. It is currently the only known hantavirus that can spread from human to human. That makes it extremely unusual compared to other strains. And back in 2018, in a remote town in Outbreak, Argentina, a birthday party brought together friends and family for what should have been a normal celebration. They ate together, shared food, laughed, and spent the evening in close contact, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. Among the guests, one person was unknowingly infected with a rare strain of hantavirus, the Hantavirus, which in this unusual outbreak had the ability to spread from person to person through close contacts. In the days that followed, several attendees began developing flu-like symptoms, but quickly became clear it was much more important and serious than that. What was started as a joyful gathering slowly turned into the center for a deadly outbreak that would challenge the local health authority and change how the world viewed hantavirus transmission in South America, ultimately infecting 34 people and causing 11 deaths. And that detail matters, because the cruise ship MV Hantavirus in this case also departed from Argentina. At the time this is being investigated, authorities are still trying to confirm whether the Hantavirus is truly responsible. Contact tracing had already begun, especially focusing on passengers who shared close space, including people on the same flight as the woman who died after landing. A doctor who treated symptomatic passengers on the ship also became ill. That raises the possibility of human-to-human transmission, which would fit with Hantavirus behavior. But still, it is important to stay grounded. Not every severe respiratory illness on a cruise ship ends up being something exotic. Enclosed environment can allow many infections to spread quickly, and early symptoms can look very similar across different diseases. For example, hantavirus was first recognized in the United States in early 1990s. In places like New Mexico, and cases still occur sporadically. More recently, in February 12, 2025, even high-profile deaths have raised awareness of how unpredictable it can be, such as the case of Bestie Arakawa, wife of actor Gene Hackman. She died from a hantavirus infection in her home in New Mexico. But it is not like the coronavirus, a brand new virus. In fact, it has been around for quite a while. It was discovered during the Korean War in 1950. During the Korean War, doctors started noticing something unusual in soldiers. At first, it looked like a simple flu. Fever, muscle pain, fatigue, and nothing that would raise alarm. But then some patients get much worse. They started developing bleeding problems, their kidneys began to fail, and in severe cases, the condition became life-threatening. What made it confusing was that no one could immediately explain what was causing it. It didn't fit the usual pattern of known infection at the time. Years later, researchers went back to those regions to investigate, and they found a clue in the environment. Small field rodents living around the farms and river banks. These animals were carrying a virus without getting sick themselves. When the virus was finally isolated, it was named after the river near where it was first studied, the Hantan River. That's where the name Hantavirus comes from. From there, scientists realized that it wasn't just one isolated issue. It was part of a whole group of viruses, what we now call hantaviruses, spreading by rodents in different parts of the world. The 1993 hantavirus outbreak is the moment hantavirus became known in the United States. And it started in a very specific region called the Four Corner area, where Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah meet. At the time, young healthy people in the region began showing up in the hospitals with something doctors couldn't immediately explain. They came in with flu-like symptoms like fever, muscle ache, and fatigue. But then things escalated quickly, their breathing became difficult, and their lungs started filling with fluids. Some deteriorated within hours to days. Doctors were alarmed because they were previously healthy young adults and suddenly a flu-like illness was killing them. That was what made the outbreak so strange and so frightening. The illness was later identified as Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome or HPS. Investigators eventually traced the source back to the environment. That year, unusual ecological conditions had changed the landscape. Heavy rainfall led to a surge in vegetation, and with more vegetation came a population boom in deer mice across the region. Those mice were carrying a virus that humans were accidentally exposed to, mainly through inhaling particles from dried urine, droppings, or nesting materials. The virus responsible was later named Virus, and it became the first recognized cause of HPS in the Americas. And depending on the strain, hantaviruses can affect humans in different ways, from severe kidney problems to serious lung complications. The Asian and European variation cause a disease called hemorrhagic fever renal syndrome, or HFRS, which mostly affect the kidney and blood vessels. But in North and South America, they cause cardiopulmonary syndrome, where they damage the heart and the lung at the same time. And there are more than 24 types of them known to infect humans. And humans usually become infected not by touching the rodent directly, but by breathing in viral particles that become airborne. Because the virus is present in rodent saliva, urine, and feces, which they pass into the environment where humans can get exposed. Imagine sweeping an old dusty garage, or cleaning a cabin that has been closed for months, or opening storage boxes contaminated with rodent droppings. As the dust rises into the air, microscopic viral particles can enter your lungs. And that's how infection can begin. And that's also why farmers, forestry workers, campers, and people cleaning rodent-infested spaces are considered especially at risk. But still, half of people acquire the infection in or around the home. And once someone breathes it in, the virus travels deep into the lungs, reaching the terminal bronchioles and alveoli. From there, it can enter the bloodstream, likely through a type of immune cells in the lung called alveolar macrophage. And the virus itself is dangerous, but much of the damage actually comes from your own immune system. After entering the lungs, the virus infects endothelial cells, the cells lining the blood vessels. Then the immune system launches an aggressive response. Immune cells release powerful inflammatory chemicals called cytokines, and this can trigger something known as cytokine storm, which make blood vessels extremely leaky. Fluid escapes from the bloodstream into the lungs begin flooding from the inside. This is why patients can suddenly drown in fluid without actually inhaling water. And doctors call this pulmonary edema. And once enough fluid fills the lung, oxygen can no longer properly move into the bloodstream, and patients begin gasping for air. One of the most frightening things about hantavirus in North and South America is how quickly patients can deteriorate. Someone may walk into the hospital talking normally, even joking with doctors, only having mild flu-like symptoms such as fever, body ache, headache, fatigue, nausea, vomiting, or abdominal pain. And in less than 2 days, they may need intensive care or even be in a body bag. And there is no specific cure for hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. No magical antiviral treatment exists so far that reliably stops it. So, treatment mainly focuses on supportive care. Doctors try to support the body long enough for the immune system and the lung to recover. That may include oxygen therapy, careful fluid management, medication to support blood pressure, mechanical ventilation, and in severe cases, ECMO. ECMO is an advanced machine that temporarily takes over the job of the lungs, and sometimes both lung and heart, allowing oxygen to circulate while the body fights the infection. Some hospitals have reported surprisingly good survival rate when ECMO is started early enough, especially during the first 48 hours after hospitalization. But even with modern intensive care, patients can still deteriorate very rapidly. And the mortality rate is around 40%, which means more than one-third of the infected people will die. And in a strange way, this is both a bad thing and a good thing. But why is it considered good when the mortality rate is so high? Because when the disease kills the host quickly, it limits how long the patient can spread the virus to others. And it naturally reduces transmission, which means less people would get the infection and the overall death will decrease. But in Asia or Europe, doctors deal with something completely different and much less deadly. Because the strain found in these regions mostly cause HFRS, or hemorrhagic fever renal syndrome. The viruses mainly attack the kidneys and blood vessels, causing fever, bleeding, bruising, petechiae, and flank pain due to acute kidney injury, among other symptoms. And if these strains are responsible, the mortality rate is much lower, around 1% to 15%, compared to over 40% in cases of American strains. But the big question is, could this sometime be a new COVID? Probably not, because it is not a new virus and it is not a new outbreak. There was an outbreak in Argentina during a birthday party in 2018, but it was successfully controlled after infecting 34 people and killing 11 of them. And infection with these viruses are serious with a high mortality rate. And ironically, when a virus kills too effectively, it often struggles to spread widely. That's because infected patients may become severely ill or die before they have many chances to transmit the virus to others. Once the patients are isolated, hospitalized, or too sick to move around, the chain of transmission begins to break. At the same time, health authorities can respond quickly, isolating patients, helping contain the outbreak before it spreads further. But the best protection is still prevention. Keep homes and workplaces clean, seal openings that allow rodents to enter the buildings, avoid direct contact with rodent droppings, ventilate closed spaces before cleaning them, use gloves and protective masks in heavily contaminated areas, and control rodent infestation around homes and workplaces. Interestingly, sunlight and UV light may help inactivate the virus in the environment. So something as simple as opening the window and allowing ventilation into dusty, closed spaces may help reduce the risk. Have a good day and night, and like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.